All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this week's YouTube Live. Sorry about the delay. Thank you all for waiting. And thank you very much for all the mods who have been staying up. Normally it's a bit earlier than this. And so I know that you guys have been waiting up. So thank you so much for doing that. And good to see you all. Okay, so normal sort of YouTube Live this week is just this is just for everybody. It's not a like just for members or anything like that. So everyone's welcome to ask questions, and happy to answer as many as we can for the next sort of hour or two, however long we can go. So any questions, please fire them out. And hello, Darvin. Good to see you, and thank you all for all of your help. Let's see here. Sorry, I'm going to mute that. Okay. All right. So one thing I'll just sort of talk about quickly while people are sort of coming up with some questions is people are talking about how there might be some issues with thyroid issues, or you don't want to go ketogenic. If you have thyroid issues, or maybe this can precipitate thyroid issues, that's not actually something I've ever seen in practice, but B, it's actually not supported by the literature. There are a lot of different studies that show a bit of a sort of mixed picture, and maybe there's a bit of a dip in thyroid function or something like that. But it's also been shown biochemically that you actually don't need as much thyroid hormone to have the exact same metabolic rate or higher if you're in ketosis, because you don't need as much of your thyroid hormone in order to process ketones to make ATP. The other thing is that for every study that someone says, well, this shows there could be a problem with your thyroid, there are another 3 or 4 that show that exactly the opposite of that there's no damage to your thyroid. So there's studies looking at people in ketogenic diets for 2 years or more, and no issues with the thyroid. In fact, they found many people improved, or no spikes in their cortisol. In fact, many people improved, and many other hormonal and metabolic markers improved as well. And then you have to sort of differentiate that between ketogenic diets and a ketogenic carnivore diet. The carnivore diet is a ketogenic diet, but it's also different because it's a plant-free ketogenic diet, and there's an entire category of plant toxins called goitrogens that cause goiters. Your friends' Brussels sprouts have a lot of goitrogens in them, and this disrupts the normal functioning of your thyroid. They can block iodine from going in your thyroid or any of your cells, and cause thyroid dysfunction, and there's other mechanisms as well. So kale is full of goitrogens. This is why they had to stop giving them to livestock. They tried to give them to sheep and cows, and it was killing, causing thyroid dysfunction, killing the babies. They were having stillbirths with giant goiters and large thyroids that were sort of as big as their heads, and horrible deformities and stillbirths and deaths, right? And then they gave it to dairy cows, and the kale to the dairy cows, and the milk from the dairy cows were actually giving people who drank it goiters and thyroid dysfunction. And then they just said, well, just screw it, give it to people then. Oh, great idea. Cruciferous vegetables generally have a lot of goitrogens, and other types of vegetables do as well. Broccoli is a bad actor for thyroid dysfunction as well. So when people go carnivore, they're getting rid of all these things. And so there's a big difference between doing a carnivore diet and just a standard ketogenic diet, where a lot of people are told you have to eat tons and tons and tons of leafy greens because that's where you get all those nutrients from. Actually, that's where you get all the anti-nutrients and toxins from. There's actually very poor nutrients bioavailability and just content in leafy green vegetables and cruciferous vegetables. And you also get all the goitrogens. And so it could be that there's difference in the literature where some studies are like, yeah, no, there's no thyroid dysfunction. Actually, there's an improvement in a lot of cases, versus the other ones that say, oh, yeah, there does seem to be a bit of a drop. That could very well be between what those individuals are eating. and what how many vegetables they're eating with how many goitrogens they are eating. My thyroid levels, since I've started checking them, since I've been carnivore, and I never checked them before that, so I don't have anything to compare it to, they've all been in the optimal levels. So that's and that's what I look at. I don't just look at the normal reference ranges. I look at there are studies that have been done that show what is the optimal reference range for the different hormones, vitamins, minerals, things like that. And that's where mine have been for my thyroid and my vitamins, minerals, and things like that. So that's never been an issue. And since I've done that, I mean, I'm on what, going on 8 years now. I'm very strict, never cheated once, don't eat carbs or anything else like that. So it's definitely not an issue of ketosis. My thyroid function has been perfect. My T3 has been perfect. My conversion of T4 to T3 has been perfect. My TSH has been perfect. And it hasn't changed. It's basically been like identical the whole way through. And so I just don't see how that is as a product of ketosis. I think it's more likely a product of eating a whole bunch of goitrogens. But again, you know, in that ketogenic literature, some people on ketogenic diet maybe have you know, a bit of an issue, and then others don't, and they improve. But people on carnivore diets, I don't see them ever having an issue. In fact, I have seen so many people in my clinical practice that have improved their thyroid issues by going carnivore. One big reason, they're getting rid of those goitrogens. That's a big problem, right? And also a lot of people, maybe, especially in Australia, the soil is just very deficient in iodine. And so unless they're eating a lot of seafood, they may be deficient in iodine anyway. And you have these goitrogens which block out the iodine from getting into your cells in your thyroid. That's going to compound and exacerbate that issue. So now you're getting rid of those, and you're getting more nutrient density, maybe even eating more fish. All of a sudden, you have increased iodine, and you have no goitrogens blocking out the iodine, you're doing a lot better. So you don't even need as much iodine when you're not eating plants. Also, the best nutrient source of zinc, which is required for the conversion of T4 into T3, which is the active form of thyroid hormone, that is the most abundant and bioavailable sources of zinc and selenium, which is also required for the conversion of T4 into T3, are from fish, or meat, basically. So oysters being number 1 for zinc, beef being number 2. And for selenium, seafood and beef are the 2 best sources of bioavailable selenium. And also, you're not getting it with these anti-nutrients, which are going to block out the absorption of zinc and selenium and other vitamins and minerals as well. Because as we know, from various studies, these anti-nutrients, the phytic acid, the lectins, the tannins, the oxalates, the saponins, the protease inhibitors, the lipase inhibitors, etc. These can act, and then lectins can bind to your intestinal walls and block out absorption generally. Fiber can block out up to 30% of the absorption generally. That these things can block out up to 100% of your vitamins and minerals. So studies have shown that black beans eaten with oysters actually block out 75% of the absorption of zinc, and that oysters eaten with corn tortillas block out 100% of the zinc. So if you go on a ketogenic diet that includes plants, and all of a sudden you see your T4 and T3 sort of disparity, you have maybe normal T4, but now you have lower levels of T3, that's likely because you're not absorbing zinc and or selenium. Selenium can be deficient in the soil. So in Australia, zinc and selenium are pretty deficient in the soil. But the benefit of doing it from cows is cows need zinc and selenium as well. And so even if the zinc and selenium are deficient in the soil, they have to have like mineral licks and things like that. And so because if cows don't get selenium, they can actually get muscular dystrophy. It's called nutritional muscular dystrophy in cows. And so they're gonna actually have more selenium, certainly more selenium than the vegetables that are raised in Australia, because the soil just doesn't have it. And then even when they're growing these crops, even if whatever little selenium was in the soil, they're not replacing selenium they're just replacing just the nutrients that make that plant grow big, so they can sell the weight of it, because that's what makes the money. They don't make money based on how much selenium is in there. They don't make any money based on how many nutrients are in there. So it's you are going to get very little selenium, and you're also not going to absorb a lot of that selenium if you're taking it in from plants. There are exceptions to that. Things like Brazil nuts have a decent amount of selenium. I don't know how bioavailable they are, but you eat enough, they'll get enough. You eat too much, you actually get too much. Too much selenium can actually be toxic. So the thing is, though, is that you just eat beef, you just eat seafood, you're going to get all the selenium that you need, and so then your T4 and T3 should be fine. And then also the leading cause of hypothyroidism is Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is an autoimmune condition, which all autoimmune conditions improve on a carnivore diet, because this is likely these plant toxins that are causing the harm, most likely the lectins that are causing these autoimmune issues in the first place. And so you get rid of those things, and all of a sudden the autoimmune process goes away, and the damage starts to heal and recede, and certainly not continue to damage your thyroid, and you improve. And so your thyroid improves. And I see this hundreds of people, literally hundreds of people, over 100 patients I have Hashimoto's. Other patients just have sort of borderline low or sort of low grade hypothyroidism, things like that, or even high grade hypothyroidism, or not converting T4 into T3. And you correct these things, and you correct their diet, and you correct their nutrition, and all of a sudden things just start to improve. And you can have permanent damage from Hashimoto's, and it may not be possible to get you off all of your medication, but a lot of people are able to come off their medication, or at least reduce their medication, and they feel a lot better for that. And that can take a while, especially with Hashimoto's. I mean, it can take a year, 2 years for people's thyroid to heal. It's not a fast-growing tissue. It's not like your gut that sort of replaces itself quite readily. The thyroid is more of a sort of a permanent tissue. And so while it can heal, it doesn't heal to the same extent or at the same sort of rapidity as things like your gut lining or your skin, things like that. So just keep that in mind. People sort of say, well, if you have a thyroid issue, you probably shouldn't go on a ketogenic diet or carnivore diet, because that's a ketogenic diet. That's not true. Ketosis does not damage your thyroid. In fact, it can actually improve your metabolic function, because you don't need as much thyroid hormone to elicit the same metabolic rate and energy generation in your mitochondria. So that's very important. And if you're doing an actual carnivore diet, not just a ketogenic diet, you're getting rid of these goitrogens, getting rid of these plant toxins that are going to screw up your thyroid production, thyroid formation. You're going to be improving your autoimmune conditions if you have one, if that's the reason that you have low thyroid, things like that. So a lot of benefits from going carnivore, especially for your thyroid, and many other things as well. So I hope that is clear for everybody. I know this is kind of sort of going around, that you may need to be mindful and not go carnivore or not go keto if you are having thyroid issues, or you may be at risk of having thyroid issues. So just keep that in mind. Okay. All right. So hello, everyone. So Zoe is calling from Montreal. So that's pretty good. It's a bit late there. Thank you so much for joining in. Well, thank you very much for joining. Thank all of you for joining. Please do let us know, where you're calling in from. Please do hit like as well, and that sort of will send this out to more people, so that people know that we're doing a live, and they can join as well. So we had a question here. It said, I'd like to know what you think of prolonged water fasting, like 7 to 15 days. I don't think they're typically necessary. It depends on what you're going for. If you want to just force yourself to lose weight, you'll lose weight doing that. But you'll be in ketosis anyway if you just eat a carnivore diet. Your body will do this in a normal way, and you can actually suppress your metabolism if you fast for too long. And if you're sort of feasting and fasting, is sort of a term that gets thrown around a bit, eating just a ton of meat in one time, and then you fast for a while, and then eat your fill those other times, that is a bit better. But I typically don't recommend fasting. I just eat fatty meat until it stops tasting good. One thing that you can do is sometimes if you sort of have a sort of an unhealthy relationship with food, and you sort of eat a lot more than you probably should. Sometimes fasting for a couple of days, it helps just sort of reset that and sort of realize that, like, oh, actually, I don't need nearly as much food. And then we start eating again after 2-3 days of having fasted. You're generally not nearly as hungry. You don't eat nearly as much, and so you might actually sort of reset those sort of hunger signals, and your body sort of resets your demand. I mean, 7 to 15 days, and that's a long time. And you have to start thinking about refeeding syndrome after that. After any fast over 5 days, you have to think about refeeding syndrome, which can actually make you very sick and get your electrolytes completely out of balance and be unhealthy. And so you'd have to be very, very careful when you start adding food back in. You just eat a small amount, and yes, you would go back to just eating meat. You just eat. Should only just eat meat. So however you're going to do it, just eat meat, and that's what your body is best able to break down and absorb and get the nutrients that you need. So, but you would start with a small amount, just a very small amount, and then you just wait for a couple hours. If everything's okay, you eat a little bit more. Wait for 2 hours, eat a little bit more, something like that. There are protocols for refeeding you can look up online, but that's sort of a rough general guideline. I don't recommend things like fasting unless someone had something like cancer. Then you're trying to starve out the cancer cells and not bring in food, not raise your insulin, not raise your blood sugar. Just keep it very baseline. Get your GKI down, get your ketones up, your blood sugar down, and that is a way that you can help to starve out the cancer, because of this something called the Warburg effect. It was named after Dr. Otto Warburg, who showed that cancer cells require 400 times the amount of glucose that normal cells do, and they can't run on ketones because the mitochondria are dysfunctional. They can also run on glutamine. You make glucose, you make glutamine, but if you're eating glucose and glutamine, then obviously you're increasing the available energy. So you are not going to make the same amount of glucose and glutamine just naturally. You're just going to make it as per your body's requirements and demands. If you're eating glucose and glutamine, that's going to be excess amounts that will then have to be stored. But before it's properly stored, these cancer cells are going to suck them up disproportionately. And it's not just going to evenly go throughout the body, and then a fraction of that is going to go in. If you have 1% of your body is filled up with cancer, 1% of that glucose and glutamine is not going to go to that. It's going to be a much higher percentage, and in fact, the majority of that is going to go into that. We see this with PET scans. It's called the Warburg effect. We use that. We give somebody an injection of radio-labeled glucose, and we see where that goes. And it predominantly goes to these areas with cancer, and they light up like a Christmas tree on your CT scan, on your PET CT. So every time you have a bagel, think of that. Think of a PET scan where the cancers are lighting up, right? Or a soda or something else that has carbs or sugar in it. Honey, fruit, doesn't matter. That's what cancers feed on. It's not to say that will cause cancer, but it will feed cancer. It will definitely feed cancer. And also, it's not going to help you avoid cancer as much as you think, because carbohydrates, period, will raise your insulin. Insulin blocks autophagy and mitophagy, which prevents you from turning over and breaking down these old precancerous damaged cells, and also prevents you from recycling and restoring your mitochondria. And again, if you have healthy mitochondria, you cannot get cancer. That was shown by Dr. Otto Warburg, and it's been proven subsequently again. So if you keep your insulin down, you're going to continue to have healthy mitochondria. You're going to keep turning over these old damaged cells, through autophagy, mitophagy, mitogenesis. You're going to make more mitochondria, and it's going to be much, much, much more difficult for you to start damage your body so much that you develop cancer. So that's pretty much my thoughts on fasting. I don't think you need to do it just as a normal person on a carnivore diet. So keep that in mind. And if you are doing something longer than that, if that's what you choose to do, just remember that over 5 days, you need to start thinking about refeeding slowly so you don't get refeeding syndrome. Okay. There's a question from Cheryl Sheldon that says, "Hi, Dr. Chaffee, why am I so weak and I can't stick to a carnivore longer than a week? Is there a breakthrough time?" Usually about 2 weeks, 2-3 weeks is when you start getting, improving your energy. There is a withdrawal period. You are actually withdrawing from a lot of these chemicals, compounds that are like drugs. They are drugs. And some of them are definitely drugs like sugar. And that takes time to get through, and people can feel pretty rotten when they're withdrawing from that. Also, if people are losing too much salt in the beginning adaptation phase, they can feel a bit weak from that. They can feel lightheaded when they stand up, things like that. So you drink more water, add more salt, that sort of thing. Sometimes people need to add up to 5 to 7 grams of salt while they're transitioning, and that can really help. But you need to drink a lot of water with that, because it's actually the water, you're losing the sodium. The water goes with it, and that drops your blood volume. That makes you dizzy and lightheaded and low blood pressure and things like that. And so that can make you feel pretty rotten too. So yes, a bit more salt, but water. Water is what you actually need. It's the salt that you're losing that makes you lose more water as well. So you need both. So more salt, more water, if you're in that circumstance. Long term, typically don't need to do that. I don't really use salt anymore, but that's years down the track. At first I used a lot of salt. And so your adaptation can take a while. So your body becomes keto adapted, meaning that it's more efficient at using ketones, and you get more energy from those ketones. And that realistically takes about 6 months to get fully keto adapted. But after about 2-3 weeks, typically people actually have as much energy they had before, and then it starts improving. For me, after 2 weeks, I had so much energy. I just felt fantastic. And so, and that just improves and improves and improves. And in clinical trials and top elite athletes, as little as 6 weeks, they tested these people. They said they were better at they were back to their normal self in about 3 weeks max. But at 6 weeks, they've shown through clinical trials, you get no drop in athletic performance 6 weeks on a ketogenic diet like carnivore. And that 3 months on a ketogenic diet, actually the keto group was outperforming the carb groups. And then it just continues to get better from there as you continue to get more adapted and better mitochondrial function, etc. So you just stick with it. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. It's usually about 2-3 weeks, and then you'll get through the cravings and all that sort of stuff. Make sure you're eating enough. Eat enough fatty meat, enough fat in particular. Most people undereat fat. Or maybe they're not even doing a full carnivore diet. Maybe they're still having a bit of artificial sweeteners or a bit of this or a bit of that. That's just going to hold you back. That's going to keep you having cravings. That's going to keep you from seeing the best results that you can. So just for 30 days, just commit to, like, I'm only eating meat, eggs, and water. That's it. Nothing else. Fish is fine. Any type of meat, any type of animal that you would normally see at the grocery store is fine. If you really want to do this right, do 90 days, just 90 days, bang, but at least 30 days. You got to give yourself longer than that. First 2 weeks can be a bit of a chore. Eat enough, eat fatty meat until it stops tasting good. Every time you get cravings, think to yourself, maybe I'm hungry, try to eat. If it tastes good, you're hungry, keep eating. And that usually helps with the cravings as well. And just understand that because of this adaptation, you're gonna have a dip in the energy, but that usually comes back out. Not everybody gets that dip. I didn't get that dip. I felt fine. Actually felt a little better and better. But after 2 weeks, then it really started getting better. So good luck with that. So here's a quick one I'll do, and then I'm going to go into the super chat. That's from Joe Voss. Good evening, Dr. Chaffee. Well, why is there so much of a general consensus on diet of male bodybuilding so heavily focused on carbs? 5 weeks sober, go to the gym and want to start on carnivore. Thanks. Well, first of all, congratulations. Being carnivore, especially ketogenic carnivore, actually has been shown, just ketogenic diets have been shown to help people get off alcohol in particular, specifically, and actually have an easier withdrawal and need a lower amounts of benzodiazepines for DTs. So there's an objective benefit by being in ketosis while you're trying to get off of that sort of stuff. The general consensus changes on a whim, and that's actually not the case. I mean, just because a lot of people jabber about this sort of stuff doesn't mean that like the main bodybuilders and bodybuilding coaches actually do that. You look at Arnold Schwarzenegger; he was very low carb. He was actually like 0 carb for 3 months leading up to his stepping on the stage. Serge Nubret, which was his body idol, again 3 months 0 carbs and very low carbs throughout the year. It was high fat, moderate protein, or even amounts of fat and protein for a lot of these guys. Vince Gironda, same thing. There was a guy, I can't remember his name, but I can maybe find it up on my YouTube history. He was an old school bodybuilder. He's been a professional bodybuilder, won all these different titles and things like that. Going back 40 years. He just put out a video recently that someone sent me that basically said that this is not actually what bodybuilders do. What this is sort of a new, even into the 80s and 90s, it was all low carb, no carb sort of things. And then other times they have this bulking and cutting where they use a bunch of carbs to bulk up, but then they get all fat and bloated, and then they'd have to go no carbs and just sort of shred all that down. And he was saying this is a waste of time. You eat a whole bunch of carbs, you're just going to put on fat. You're not bulking with muscle, you're bulking with fat, and it's just useless. And you don't feel as good, and you're less healthy and things like that. So there's a video. I don't know if I can put it up in the chat, but it's the thumbnail is called just Carb Myths, and it shows a picture of this big bodybuilder, this guy back in his competition days. It says what carbs really do after a workout. And it's Dr. Nash Josic, J-O-C-I-C, and he espouses very low carb, and especially leading into a competition, getting shredded. You just cut out the carbs. He is very similar, saying very similar things now to what Vince Gironda said, 40, 50 years ago, which was just eat steak and eggs. That's what you eat. That's what humans are designed to eat. And you actually do replenish your glycogen. Gironda thought that you couldn't replenish your liver glycogen without having some carbs. So every sort of once a week sort of thing, like 4 or 5 days or whatever, he'd sort of do a refeed day with carbs. And so that's what this gentleman was saying too. It's sort of almost exactly the same. It's like if you're sort of below a certain body fat or above this and the other, you sort of add in carbs at different times, but it's like once a week or less in a lot of cases. Or maybe once every 4 or 5 days or something like that as a bodybuilder. And then when you're cutting down, you just cut those things out. And he even spoke about how actually you do make glycogen and things like that de novo, but he may not be aware of some of the literature and some of the experiments I mentioned about you're being in ketosis. You actually improve your athletic performance at least after 3 months anyway. That was the McSweeney trial in 2018. And I have a whole video on ketogenic carnivore athletes on YouTube on the Low Carb Down Under channel. There's a medical conference I spoke at. And I go into all this, and all the references and papers are all there that you can go and check out. But there was another study by Volek and Finney in 2016 that showed on muscle biopsy, the people that have been in ketosis as elite world-class athletes for 9 months to 36 months, average 22 months, that on ketogenic diets, that they were, again, they were performing at a higher level than carb athletes, but that on muscle biopsy, they actually found that they had the same muscle glycogen before a 3-hour run, directly after a 3-hour run, And then 3 hours after the recovery, even though carb athletes were sucking down sugars and gels and all that sort of crap, and the keto athletes were just generating the stuff on their own. So he may not be aware that actually your body replenishes glycogen as well as or better than the carb athletes who are taking down the sugar and carbs. So like you do not need to have carbs to replace your muscle and liver glycogen at all. We've actually proven that in high level athletes. They actually show as well, some people think that you have to have more carbs if you're doing an elite sort of competition, sort of elite performance, because it's generally recognized that above 55% VO2 max that you switch to carb burning. But that's only in people that are already in a carbohydrate burning metabolism. When you're in a ketogenic metabolism, even for 1 week, it's actually been shown that you get you're actually burning fat from fat oxidization. You're getting energy from fat oxidization over 90% VO2 max. So actually you're still burning fat as long as you have access to your fat and your insulin is low enough that you can even access your fat in the first place. The reason that your body wants to use fat, but if you start working, you need more energy and your insulin is too high, you just simply can't produce that because you're not in ketosis, then of course you're going to go to your backup, right? If your body's picking fat first and then it switches to glucose because it runs out of fat, that means that's a backup. That's a backup fuel source. It's preferring the fat. And then when you're in ketosis and you can produce that fat, it actually switches, it actually stays in fat burning over 90% VO2 max. And then you go past that and then it's like, oh, okay, well, we'll start touching in some carbs and things like that. So if you're not keto adapted, maybe you're not getting the same performance early on. There's something called a supernova trial where they basically only let people keto adapt for like a week or two, and they didn't have enough electrolytes and all these other sorts of problems with the study. And they even found then that they were burning fat over 90% VO2 max, but their performance dropped a bit. Okay, but you go 6 weeks, no drop. You go 3 months, keto group outperforms them. And again, you're burning fat at over 90% VO2 max. So just because the consensus is one thing doesn't mean that was always the consensus, and it doesn't mean that that's the best option. The amount of steroids that people are using now, I mean, you could put a teacup and compete at the Arnold on the Olympia and things like that with the amount of drugs they use on any diet. I mean, the diet and the things that people recommend when they're just bucketing down, horse loads of steroids. It's just like they could be right, but the fact of the matter is that regardless of what you're eating, the amount of roids that they're taking, they're going to get results. What about the guys who didn't take the PEDs? Who didn't do that? Before, I mean, Arnold was the sort of the beginning of the steroid era. It was still pretty new then. Garanda, who was sort of the guru in before Arnold's day, and the guru afterwards as well, he abhorred steroids. He thought it gave very unattractive and unphysiological muscle composition and things like that. He just thought it just looked bad. It was a bad aesthetic, and regardless of health concerns, it was just like that doesn't get what you want. And so they were outright against that, and they had some of the best physiques in history. It's steak and egg, steak and egg, steak and egg. So you want to look at what the best natural competitors, actual natural competitors, did. They didn't use a whole bunch of drugs and steroids and things like that. Then listening to their advice on nutrition and saying, hey, look, I've tried all these different sorts of things. This is what I found to be the best. That's something that will hold more water. And now that may not be perfect either, but at least it's a better piece of information than just some roid monster that have just jacked themselves up with crazy amounts of juice. I mean, you could eat diesel fuel and probably do fine on that sort of stuff. I mean, it's just not useful information when people are in that situation. So people that are using tons of steroids, I just don't really care to listen to any of their nutrition advice. It doesn't matter. I sort of have my own opinions on nutrition anyway, so I don't really care too much about what others say about it as well. But you know, it's not something you want to listen to when people are just using crazy amounts of juice. And also, when you use carbs, you will put on fat. And so you'll bulk up. Yeah, you'll put on weight, but most of that's going to be fat. I mean, you're really not putting on any body mass. Whereas if you're just eating meat, steak, eggs, things like that, high fat, moderate protein, you're going to be ripped all year round. You're going to be lean all year round. I stay under 10% body fat year round. And even when I'm not able to work out, when I'm working out, if I'm running, if I'm playing rugby or lifting weights regularly, I'm, you know, without effort or without cutting calories or anything like that, I'm like down to 6% body fat, things like that. So I can get very lean just naturally, and I put on muscle easier than I ever have in my entire life. Just eat a lot of fatty meat, eat until it stops tasting good, train fasted, and then eat a lot on the other times, and you'll do great. You'll get a lot of great results, and you'll feel good is the main thing. You'll be healthy because you can manipulate yourself in a lot of different ways. It doesn't mean that you're doing it in a healthy way. So this is healthy, and this gives you long-term health and actually better results than these other guys are getting anyway. All right, so we're going to start into the super chats here. Melissa, I don't really understand your private chat, by the way, so maybe you can clarify that. So the super chat's from Bush Rangian Order. Thank you so much for the super chat. It's good to see you again. Thanks for coming back. They say, hello, if someone has had their gallbladder removed, ligamentum teres, sling, and Barrett's syndrome, do you have any recommendations for their diet and frequency of meals and snacks? Well, in particular with gallbladder, you will still make bile. It's just made in your liver, and it's just stored in your gallbladder and concentrated. And so if you don't get food, you know, every day, you'll still get you'll still have enough concentrated bile so that you can break down and absorb all the fat that you need, and so you can get all the nutrition that you need. So most people that have a gallbladder removed, eventually they'll form something called a pseudo gallbladder. It can take some time to do that, so it won't happen straight away. But those people, those pseudo gallbladders actually work just like a gallbladder. So that there's no issue. Just eat fatty meat until it stops tasting good, and you should be fine. For people that don't have a pseudo gallbladder, after they've gotten their gallbladder taken out, you may just need to split up your meals. So you're going to be making bile at a set rate, just sort of dripping out of your liver at a constant rate, day and night. And so you just need to split up your meal so you sort of catch that, because that's just dripping into your upper intestine. And then you just sort of eat maybe 4 or 5 meals with fat, and you know, your fat sort of split up throughout the day. And basically you're trying to eat as much fat as you can absorb without getting loose stools. So you eat fatty meat until you get sort of soft stools, but not loose stools. If you eat a lot more fat than your body can absorb at one time, you might have to go to the bathroom and have some loose stools like in 20-30 minutes after the meal. And if that's the case, you just eat a bit less fat next time. And so you have to sort of still need to get the same amount of fat over the course of the day, but you may have to split that up. So that's pretty much what you do with sort of anything. It's regardless of any surgeries you've had, any syndromes you have, you just eat fatty meat until it stops tasting good and until you get soft stools and not loose stools. And so you just have to sort of play with that. I mean, so even people that have had and so you have to so people that had like surgery and things like that, bariatric surgery, things like they may not be able to eat as much as they would like to in one time. So again, you just sort of have to split these things up. Maybe you don't, logistically, you can't eat as much as you want at one time. Maybe it makes you too tired if it's eating during the day, and so you have to go for a second meal at night, things like that. So things like Barrett's esophagus, we don't know exactly what causes that. There does seem to be a relationship between Barrett's esophagus and having gallbladder removed. One of the doctors and researchers that it was one of our tutors in medical school, actually sort of came up with the idea that it might be from the reflux of bile sort of changing and affecting the lower esophagus, and that sort of makes those cellular changes that we call Barrett's esophagus. One good way to deal with that: eat more fat. That soaks up the bile, never regurgitates up in the first place. But also you're going to be going through autophagy and mitophagy, and you're going to be improving that cellular function, improving the mitochondria, and you're going to make it less likely for that Barrett's esophagus, which is a precancerous situation. You can make that less likely to turn into cancer. And certainly anecdotally, people have found that their Barrett's esophagus has improved or even gone away. So I can't say that's going to happen for everybody, but I have seen that happen. And you sort of think about it mechanistically. This is going to improve mitochondrial function. It's going to improve cellular function, and so on. And so hopefully that helps as well. Okay. All right. So let me see here. So next question is from Tahoe. Thank you so much for the super chat, Tahoe. I really appreciate it. Hey, Doc, for those with a lot of fat to lose, would you still suggest fatty red meat? Would leaner cuts be better? Also, I'm 5'11", 274 pounds with good underlying muscle mass. I struggle to eat enough to hit protein macros. Again, I just wouldn't check your macros at all. Eat fatty meat until it stops tasting good. Your body's going to tell you what to do. Your body knows how much it needs. You're going to recycle a lot of these proteins and things like that. You don't necessarily have to get them all from your food all the time and every day. You don't need protein for energy. So tracking protein as if they were a calorie source is not the same, because you use most of those things as building blocks as opposed to energy. You don't need them for energy, so you need a lot less than you think. And so the fat is where you get the energy from. But that is still a nutrient. It's not just a calorie source. There are essential fatty acids that you have to have or you will get sick and die. There are essential fat-soluble nutrients that you have to have or you get sick and die. So you don't want to just eat super lean meat, because you're going to be nutritionally deficient and your body's not going to be as healthy. And you can actually slow down your metabolism by being nutritionally deficient, because your body looks at this and they're like, well, hold on a second, we may have energy, but we don't have nutrients. The body tracks nutrients, it doesn't track calories. And so it is looking at this and going like, hey, if we ramp up our metabolism, like, sure, we've got the energy for it, but if we do, we have a requirement for all these vitamins, minerals that we don't have enough of, and we're going to run out. We're going to hit a bottleneck. And so it actually can slow down your metabolism. So you need to eat enough. You need to eat enough of these nutrients as well. If your body doesn't want the fat, it will tell you. It will not taste good, or you won't absorb it, and you'll get loose stools. So just eat fatty meat until you get soft stools, but not loose stools, and you'll be fine. In fact, if you just eat more lean meat, you can actually, if you get the majority of your calories from protein as opposed to fat, you can actually get protein poisoning. You can actually get sick from this. That's not good for you. So don't do that. It's also called rabbit starvation. That's not good. So the other thing is that a lot of people find that when they increase fat, that actually stimulates fat loss. And how can that possibly be? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One, you're stimulating your metabolism. You're not in a famine. You're not in a fast. Your body doesn't think it's winter and you're in a famine. And, we have to hang on to this stuff as much as possible. And the other thing is that as you increase your fat as a proportion of your calories and decrease your protein as a proportion of calories and get your caloric intake below 9% calories from protein in a day and the rest from fat, so like 91% of your calories from fat, you actually trigger a hormone release called FGF21, and that triggers lipolysis and increases lipolysis by an average 400 kilocalories of energy a day. So you actually burn another 400 calories of fat just by eating more fat and less protein. That's the important part. Because you do this with carbs too. There's the sugar diet nonsense. That has nothing to do with sugar. It has to do with them lowering protein. And protein goes down below 9%. Sugar goes up, fat goes down. They trigger FGF21. They start triggering lipolysis, even though insulin's up. So it's sort of a mechanism to burn fat and lipolysis, even though your insulin is up, which usually blocks lipolysis. So FGF21 forces lipolysis. You could do the same thing with fat, and you actually get nutrients, and it's good for you. And you're not going to get metabolic disease and glycation and atherosclerosis and kidney dysfunction and blind and things like that from eating excessive amounts of sugar and carbohydrates, and all the dysfunction and blocked autophagy and things like that from constantly elevated insulin levels. But also, when you're talking about just weight loss, fat loss, when you're in ketosis, so your insulin's down, you can generate ketones. It actually stimulates another 350 kilocalories of energy release. And so added to the 400 kilocalories of energy from the FGF21, you're talking about an extra 750 kilocalories added onto your basal metabolic rate, right? So you're just doing nothing, sitting there doing nothing. You're going to get an extra 750 calories of fat burning, right? It's a pretty good deal. And you're improving your metabolism, and you're improving your health, and you're improving your nutrition profile. All of these are good things, and you're not risking something like protein poisoning, right? So I would not lower your fat. I would not just eat a bunch of lean meat. You can trick yourself and force yourself into doing all sorts of different things. There's many ways to skin a cat, and while you can lose weight, just eating less in general. Is that what's going to help you long term? Is that something that's going to be sustainable, or even just from an enjoyment point of view? And is that something that's going to be sustainable from a health point of view? Because you will become malnourished. You will become malnourished if you don't get enough fat. You will. There's so many fat soluble nutrients that you have to have that only come from animal fats and just meat in general, but animal fats in particular. And so this is really important to get that right and to get your nutrient right. So just focus on your nutrition, focus on eating right, eat fatty meat until it stops tasting good. Your hormones are probably all over the place as far as your metabolism is concerned. You might have insulin resistance. You probably certainly have leptin resistance. These sorts of things take time to heal, but they do. And people can still lose weight, significantly amounts of weight, especially men for some reason. They lose a lot of weight. Whether or not their leptin is elevated. Some don't. If you have a high leptin, it could just be a bit more of a slow burn. But eventually that leptin will come down enough that you'll then start losing a lot of weight very quickly, a lot of fat, I should say, very quickly, because you don't want to lose weight, because weight could be lean body mass as well. You want to lose fat. And so eating fatty meat helps you retain your lean body mass or even improve your lean body mass and then reduce your body fat. Main things that affect leptin: insulin blocks leptin, fructose blocks leptin independently and will raise your insulin, and it usually comes with glucose, which really raises your insulin, so it hits you twice. Alcohol blocks leptin. Lectins, the plant toxins, block leptin, which is why that ketogenic diets are outperform any other diet for as far as fat loss and putting on lean body mass, but weight loss generally as well. But also ketogenic diets that remove or limit lectins from plants have actually been shown to have further weight reduction than just a ketogenic diet where you eat whatever the hell plants that you want. So like a carnivore diet where you get rid of all those lectins as well, because lectins can bind to insulin receptors 5 times more tightly than insulin, causing an insulin response even if your insulin is low. It also binds and blocks to leptin and blocks that from your brain. That slows down your metabolism, makes you store fat instead of burning fat, and increases your appetite so that you eat more and you overeat. So that's what lectins can do. So carnivore hits bang 4 of those already. Cortisol will screw up your leptin as well. And so it's from stress, poor sleep, things like that. So you need to optimize those things. And then funny enough, blue light from these artificial, sun's perfect. This has all the other spectrum of light, and it's the right time of the day that you get those blue spectrum. In artificial lights, I try to not have many artificial lights on. Certainly not like the bright white LED lights that have a lot of blue light in them. And I have blue light filters on all my screens and my phone and my computers and things like that. And I try to stay off them as much as possible. And even sometimes using blue light blocking glasses after dark. All those things affect leptin. They can block leptin, the blue light in particular. So all those things are the best thing to address. And you do now what you want to be doing in 30 years. So the same thing now, the same principles now can be applied now while you're wanting to lose body fat. And in 30 years, when you're just trying to maintain exactly where you are, or when you're trying to put on lean body mass, you eat fatty meat until it stops tasting good. You eat as many times during the day that your body is telling you to, and you try to get 1 to 2 grams of fat per gram of protein. And if you hit a stall and you're not losing fat, it could be hormonal, could be metabolic, and so you need to give your body a chance to resolve those issues. And if you want to, and you want to try to push past the stall, you can always try increasing your fat and reducing the protein a little bit as well. And that actually works for a lot of people. So that's what I would recommend. I definitely would not recommend doing the lean approach, because again, this is not a long-term solution. This can cause health issues, and you would do better doing it another way, actually increasing the fat. So good luck with that. Next question is from Luke Stevens. Thank you so much for the super chat. Question is, could you elaborate on the problem with diet sodas on the carnivore diet? They don't trigger cravings for me, so I was just curious about the other negative effects. Thank you for everything. Well, look, I mean, it's not meat, it's not water. So, these are chemicals. It doesn't matter how many grams of sugar or carbs or calories or something like that. Remember, your body, we don't burn calories. We're not a combustion engine. We are chemical factories, and we derive energy from chemical bonds that we break and change and all that sort of stuff. So regardless of whether or not it has any chemical energy or calories, they have chemicals, and they will have chemical effects in our bodies. So we bring these into our body, they're going to have a chemical effect. They can have hormonal effects. Artificial sweeteners have been shown to increase insulin, and so that can stall your weight loss. That can disrupt your metabolism in a lot of different ways. Your body is so sensitive to insulin. There's so many different processes that get disrupted by having elevated levels of insulin, especially for prolonged periods of time. And so that's something that is best to be avoided. You want to have a normal insulin level. So that's one thing that's generally applied to all artificial sweeteners. Also, there's tons of other chemicals that are in there besides the sweeteners and sodas and things like that. So, but just talking about just the artificial sweeteners, there's so many of these things that have long been associated and implicated in cancers and other sorts of ill health effects, because these are just chemicals that disrupt your body chemically. Erythritol, which is monk fruit, also called monk fruit sugar, that has been shown recently to increase your risk of DVTs and other clots in your body, which is not great. I mean, what is a heart attack? It's a clot. What is a stroke? It's a clot in your brain. So that's not what you want. You also don't want a DVT. You definitely don't want a PE, which is a pulmonary embolism. It's just a clot in the lung, because you can die from that. It's very, very dangerous and painful. So you don't want that. You don't want inappropriate clotting. And also, look at other things. Look at stevia. Oh, well, that's good. It's natural, blah, blah, blah. Arsenic's natural, right? Cyanide's natural. That's not a useful metric when you're trying to see something safe, because most things in nature will kill you. All right. So if it's natural, that is not just to say it's safe. What is natural for humans? Now, that's a very different statement. Just because something exists in nature doesn't mean that it's good for humans. But if something is natural for humans, then yes, that is something that we are biologically adapted to, and we possibly have to have things like the different vitamins, minerals, and things like that. For meat, we have to have these things. That is natural for humans. That is required for humans. And so being something natural for our biology, then yes, that's different. Stevia is not natural for our body. So even though it exists in nature, it doesn't mean that that's something that is good for us. The other thing you have to remember is things like where does stevia come from, right? Well, I'll take a step back. There was a study in mice giving these mice one serving of stevia, for the mouse per day, right? Equivalent of just one soda with stevia, sweetened with stevia, and they found that reduced the fertility rate in the mice by 55% compared to controls. Okay, so that's not good, and so that's likely disrupting hormones in some way. And the thing is that when you look into it and you and please look this up, where does the stevia plant come from, and what do people in South America, such as in Paraguay, use this plant for? Well, for the last 1,000 to 1,500 years, they've been using this as birth control. Why the hell are we putting this stuff in the water, right? Is that on purpose? Are you trying to make people infertile, or are you just, monsters and just don't care that this destroys people's fertility? Oh, it's kind of sweet and we can make millions off of this because it doesn't have calories in it. You're destroying people's hormones. You're destroying people's health, making it harder for them to have kids. And maybe that disrupts your hormones and physiology in such a way that maybe, damages that child. Who knows? We don't know. But we know that it damages their fertility rate. And, the whole plant does. We know that it damages fertility in mice. So that's very likely disrupting hormones, or at least causing these animals or humans to be less healthy in certain regards, so that their body can't get pregnant, because it's hard to be pregnant. It takes a lot out of your body, and if you're not healthy and you're not in an optimal position, your body says no, we're not going to do this because that's too dangerous. It's not going to work very well. So whether or not it has calories, whether or not it gives you cravings, it will have other effects. These are chemicals, and you're having chemical effects in your body, and most of those effects you don't want. In fact, I'd say all of those effects you don't want, or at least they're neutral and you don't care. But the ones that have effects, they're effects that you don't want. It tastes sweet, great, but there's more to life than just a sort of a semi-chemically sweet soft drink, and this will have chemical effects in your body. So you do with that information whatever you please. I mean, I have no problem with you having diet sodas or anything, or anybody having these things if they want, or smoking or drinking or whatever. It's their choice. It's your choice. I don't care. I'm just trying to get this information out there to people so they can make an informed decision on their life. The reason I don't have any of those artificial sweeteners is because just generally these are chemicals that I don't need or want in my body. So I just try to, body's a temple. I just want to put in the good things and just keep out everything else that even could potentially have a problem. And so these artificial sweeteners, I mean, the problem with this, this is the new this, and it's all about new is bad. I don't want new. I want something that's been in the food system for 50,000 years, and that humans have been eating and having very, very positive health effects as a result of, aka meat and animal fat. And I don't want something new, because new means we don't have long-term data on it. New means that we don't know what this is going to do to us 20, 30 years down the road, or even 3 generations down the line, because people do find that you feed animals certain things that generationally they have epigenetic knock-on effects that can be quite negative. And so I don't want that. I don't want that for myself. I don't want that for my kids. I don't want it for their kids. There's a saying that says you're not just eating for you, you're eating for your grandkids. So the things that you eat now will affect your grandchildren. And that's pretty powerful, and you need to sort of consider that. So I don't eat that crap because it's not necessary. It's not I don't use food as drugs. I'm not using this as like, I want this tasty, nummy experience, and I don't care that it has these weird chemicals in it. I do care that it has those weird chemicals in it. I entertain myself with food or drink. That's not entertainment to me. That's food to me. I enjoy it. I love it. I make amazing steaks and amazing meals, and I enjoy every one of them, but that's not why I'm doing it, if that makes sense. And also, these things have chemical reactions in our body, and some of these things we actually have pretty good information about, what they do to us, like causing clots, reducing fertility, screwing up your hormones, things like that, potentially even increasing cancer risk from things like aspartame, things like that. But who knows? Well, the whole point is you don't know. This is just a random chemical you're just putting in your body. If you don't need it, don't do it. And that's the other thing, sort of as a tangent. You say these different plant toxins and things like that. Oh, you can't say they're a toxin. I say, yeah, you can. You know why? Because your body, we know they're a toxin because your body tries to detoxify them, right? These chemicals don't go in your body and they get used for some process and do something. It's not a nutrient. It's not a building block. These things go in your body and your body just tries to break them down and get them out as quickly as possible. So that's a toxin. Your body's trying to detoxify and get the hell out of there. And some of these things are better or worse for you, but they're still not necessary, and your body is still working hard to get them the hell out of your body. So that's a toxin. That's not something you want in your body. And so I just don't put things in my body that my body doesn't need or want. Whether or not we know that it's horrible for you, because it doesn't matter how bad or benign it is. It's not necessary, so I don't need it. And also it could cause harm, even if it's a small amount of harm. I don't want any harm. Well, almonds only have a little bit of cyanide. I don't want any cyanide, thank you. Like, why would you want any cyanide? Why would you be okay giving cyanide to your child or to yourself? Doesn't make any sense, right? No cyanide is where you want to be. WHO, CDC said there is no safe level of cyanide, and yet, but almonds are fine. Almond cyanide, it's the same as cyanide, it's hydrogen cyanide, and that's toxic to all life. And the 35 to 40 almonds per day has enough cyanide that this will cause long-term harm. If you eat 35 to 40 almonds a day, every day, going on months or years, you will get thyroid and neurological dysfunction and mitochondrial dysfunction, because cyanide blocks the electron transport chain in your mitochondria and damages your mitochondria. So that's not what you want. And people say, oh, well, no one's going to eat 35 or 40 almonds a day. Well, the funny part about that is that my doctor told me and my family that we should eat 35 to 40 almonds a day, because they have these plant sterols that lower your cholesterol, because they tell your body that you're getting cholesterol from your food, and so you don't need to make as much. So it artificially lowers your cholesterol from what your body wanted it to be, because it's expecting to fill in the gap with the cholesterol you just ate. But it's not real cholesterol, and your body can't use it for hormones and physical structures and your brain and all these other sorts of things. And so, that lowers your cholesterol artificially, and we call that a good thing. So doctors are actually recommending for decades now that people eat the exact amount of almonds every day that will lead to long-term toxicity. So not good. So I just go for, no, I'm not going to have any of this stuff. We don't know how much is too much. We don't know how much in low doses long-term is going to cause a problem. So you know what? I don't want any of it. And I do feel different when I have these things. I do feel better when I don't have these things. And so that's, those are my 2 cents anyway. Okay. So another super chat from Bush Ranging in Order. Thank you so much for the super chat. They say, thank you. Should women avoid exercising in a fasted state due to being more likely to burn through lean mass compared to men? It has been alleged. No, that's not true. If you're in ketosis, you will not burn muscle. It's only when you're burning carbohydrates and you run out of those carbohydrates, your body then can then start to catabolize your muscles if you cannot get into your fat, because insulin blocks lipolysis. If you have access to your fat, you will only burn your fat. In fact, you won't even start to catabolize your muscles until you've run out of all of your fat. A 65 kilo individual, 155 pound person or so, with only 6% body fat. So super, super lean, leaner than most women out there, unless they're emaciated. That 6% body fat has over 35,000 kilocalories of energy available into it. So, I mean, you're not going to run out of energy anytime soon. I mean, it's going to take weeks for you to run out of that energy before you ever start cutting into your muscles. So you only cut into your muscles if you are in a carbohydrate metabolism. And that's because it's not a normal energy metabolic state, and you can't access your fat. So if you are fasted, that's actually better. You're in ketosis. Unless your insulin is still high, it depends on how long you've been fasting and what you've been eating before that. But if you're in on a carnivore diet, a ketogenic metabolism, then yeah, you absolutely want to train fasted. You'll just feel better. You can dedicate up to 40% of your blood supply to your intestines when you're breaking down food, especially if it's a big meal. So when you have that going towards your intestine, that's blood that's not available to your muscles in your brain. So you're not going to feel as good. You're not going to have as much energy. You're not going to be able to work out as hard. And so you're going to have probably, you can get crampings, or you'll go swimming for half an hour after you eat, because it can cause cramps and all that sort of stuff, because you're just screwing with your blood supply, right? I always feel better training fasted and then eating afterwards, or eating well afterwards. And oh no, women, I mean, that there's no, I mean, there are differences between the sexes, obviously, but when you look at different animal species, like there's the difference between the male and females. It doesn't really come down to like things that you're eating. It's not like female lions have to eat first and then go hunt to then get a kill and eat again or something else, or else they'll start damaging their body. I mean, they hunt. They're fasted most of the time. They may not have eaten for a week, and they're chasing antelope day in and day out and not even being successful, half the time. And then they get a kill and they gorge themselves and things like that. So, there's no reason to think that women are all of a sudden just going to have an entirely different metabolism, like they were a different species of animal, just because they're women. That doesn't make sense. And that whole assertion that you break down muscle first is nonsense. Oh, you have to keep eating carbs, because if you run out of carbs, you start catabolizing your muscles. No, not if you're in ketosis. That's false. So anybody who tells you that does not know biochemistry, and just they can look it up. I mean, it's not actually hard. So there's a difference between carb metabolism and a fat metabolism, non-carb and a carb and a non-carb metabolic state. Your body works differently, massively differently, and so these statements come from the assumption from the carb metabolism point of view. And so then they try to say, oh, well, but if you're not eating carbs, it's going to be a problem. No, it's different if you're in a non-carbohydrate metabolism. And so they're trying to, they're making assertions based on a different metabolic state. And they're trying to extrapolate that and infer what's going to happen in a non-carbohydrate state. They think the same physiological laws apply, and they don't. They just don't. So yeah, I still think you should train fasted, absolutely, because you'll just feel better. But do whatever you want. If you feel a little better having a bit of food before, fine. That's okay. Most people don't. Most people feel better training on an empty stomach, and just go from there. But no, you don't have to worry about breaking down your muscles if you're in ketosis, so which you will be on a meat and water carnivore diet. Hank M, thank you very much for the super chat. I really appreciate it. Hi, Dr. Chaffee. What are your thoughts on IgG4 related disease? I've been carnivore for the past 6 weeks. Symptoms still there, but improved. I will have to take rituximab if confirmed. So any sort of issue or disease or illness, you need to work closely with your doctor to make sure that you're having appropriate amounts of that your medications is appropriate and everything that you're doing is appropriate for you. If you are seeing improvement, that's a good sign that you'll keep getting improvement. Any and all autoimmune issues that I've ever seen have improved with carnivore diets, and you're getting rid of all the plants and all the lectins and things like that, and all the agrochemicals that come with those plants and lectins, and that seems to help a lot. And so, with your specific issue, I haven't seen as many people on that, but I mean, the other things like Crohn's, I mean, that's really straightforward, and people will significantly improve straight away, quite quickly, and then be able to rebuild their gut very quickly, and their symptoms improved quite dramatically within a few weeks. But it's also the case that that if you just see yourself improving, that's a good sign that you're going to continue to improve. Does that mean that you can come off your medication? No, that means that you're improving, and that's great. And then when you've improved enough, then you can think about coming off medications with the help of your doctor. So that's that. I mean, so realistically, you're already sort of have sort of answered your sort of your own question. It's like you're already starting to improve. So great, keep going and keep going with it, and hopefully that continues to improve. So, you know, I don't have much experience with, you know, IgG4 disease. So I can't tell you how many people I've seen sort of get better and things like that, because it's just not something I've really come across too often. But the fact of the matter is, if you're improving, that's a good sign that's whatever underlying cause is being addressed by the carnivore diet, by getting rid of these lectins and plant toxins and these other sorts of things that can disrupt your normal immune system, and all these other sorts of issues that you know, that can well, and that it can help, you know, with your issues, and hopefully that resolves it, and it is addressing the underlying root cause. What we sort of just have to wait and see. But since you have improved, that's good. Give it time. I mean, there are people with like multiple sclerosis and things like that. I mean, they can take months and months and months, or even years, to see you know, significant improvement. Well, you know, 8 months. I've had patients that have reduced their lesions by 40%, which, I mean, has never been described anywhere. So that's huge. But that's still a long time. If people say, well, I want results now, damn it. Well, just remember that you have never had results like this. You've never gotten any improvement at all, ever, with anything else that you've done. So even with heavy medications, a lot of times people can tamp down the acute reaction, but they don't get much of the healing. They just sort of, and they trash their immune system the whole time. So seeing as that you're already improving, that's a good sign that this actually is addressing the underlying issues. So just try to be as healthy as possible. Try to get as good quality meat as possible. Try to stick to just beef, lamb, and water as much as you can, because those are always better for these sorts of immunological sort of issues, especially when they're reacting to lectins and other sorts of plant toxins, because the ruminant animals break down and ferment all of these things far better than anything else that don't ferment and break down these toxins. So I would just go pure beef, lamb, and water, and just continue on as you are, working with your doctor. And when your symptoms get better to the point that you feel you don't need the medication, then you talk to your doctor, say, hey, can we take a break from this and see how we're going, because I'm actually feeling really good. And then talk to them about that and see if that's appropriate. So good luck with that. I'm really glad to hear that you're doing better. And let us know how you do, you know, in a few months. You know, I mean, it's been 6 weeks. I mean, that's awesome that you're having any improvement. So again, in a few months, see how it's going, and let us know, because that's really exciting. Some Bram Barn, there's a super chat. Thank you so much for that. I'm not seeing a question attached though, but maybe if you just put it in the chat, we can try to track it down. Billy Poon, thank you so much for the super chat. Hi, Dr. C. How effective is carnivore for healing or improving bipolar? Can it support medication tapering, and what tapering practices do you recommend? So again, you have to work with your doctor on this. There's you know, specific protocols for different medications that you have to be careful of, especially with psychiatric medications. You have to wean off very slowly. There are specific protocols that are published that you have to follow for, depending on your medication. And also, if you are weaning down even according to that schedule, but you start getting more symptomatic, you go back up to whatever your previous dose was, and then give it a bit more time and see if you can wean down from there. So you just use caution, and have your doctors help with that, especially with the psychiatric meds, because they can be, you know, you can have quite a lot of symptoms and issues if you don't do that correctly. Carnivore diet, ketogenic carnivore diets can absolutely help bipolar disorder, at least according to the preliminary literature that we have at present, and certainly mass quantities of anecdotal of reports of people improving their bipolar, or even putting into remission by just doing ketogenic diets generally, and improving the mitochondrial function and their biochemistry in their brain, their metabolism, and things like that. and other sorts of things to improve their metabolism in other ways, and improve their mitochondrial function in other ways. And there's a growing body of literature showing that you can reverse psychiatric conditions like bipolar, but even schizophrenia, major depression, OCD, etc., with ketogenic diets, high-fat, meat-based ketogenic diets. There's going to be twofold. One, your brain needs ketones that actually run better on ketones. That can help in the short term. In the medium to long term, this improves mitochondrial function. It kicks off autophagy, mitogenesis. So you start breaking down these old damaged mitochondria, making more new, better ones. And as a result, your brain starts working better. Also, you are going to remove different sorts of plant toxins, things like that could be neuroinflammatory and be harmful, and that's going to be in the short term as well. And there's another one that I was trying to think of as well that popped up, and I can't remember. Anyway, there's a lot of different reasons why that can improve by going ketogenic generally, and also ketogenic carnivore diet, like a plant-free carnivore diet, because you're getting rid of those plant toxins as well. And that can improve mitochondrial function. And also, that was it. And eating a meat-based ketogenic approach, I think, will help even more. So like carnivore, because you're going to get all of these nutrients that are essential for proper brain health and functioning and rebuilding and repair. If you have damaged your neurons and different structures in your brain can't work properly, right? And so we can see this manifest differently by different sort of psychiatric conditions, brain fog, and actual physical shrinkage and atrophy of the brain, and this age-related atrophy of the brain. I don't think that's age-related. I don't think age is doing that to you. I think it's malnutrition over time. And we know that B12 deficiency in kids, a baby's brain, a 6-month-old brain, should be just completely full to the brim. And yet it looks like an 80-year-old alcoholic with Alzheimer's brain. There's all this shrinkage of the brain. And then you replace the B12, and all of a sudden it plumps way back up, but not necessarily back to where it should have been, because, yes, you've replaced the B12, and that's essential for maintaining and building the brain, but so is D3 and choline, creatine, carnitine, DHA, EPA, and yes, saturated fat and cholesterol. Those are all essential for the brain, and you only get those from animal products, meat and fat. That's it. There's no other source, right? And so, from a nutritional standpoint, you can supplement and all that sort of nonsense, but talking about real food here, and you need all those things. It's not just B12. You don't just need B12. I really actually want to see if I can share my screen here, and how the hell I do that. How the hell do I share the screen? Yeah, these different icons and things like that. It's not. Oh, there it is. Okay, I'm going to show you guys something. And these are images of babies' brains, and I'll show you something else as well. Let me see. Okay. Share screen. Okay, I don't know what that was. Some weird pop-up. Dear God. Okay, there we go. So hopefully people can see this, but this is a normal baby's brain. So this is a 20-month-old baby's brain. All that gray stuff is brain. There's little black slits there. Those are called the ventricles. And you can barely see them. They're just sort of barely there. Here's when you sort of see the touch of the ventral horn. This would be like the pons coming down to the brainstem. A little bit of the ventricle coming down there. Okay, so that's a 20-month-old baby. That's what a brain is supposed to look like in a kid. And also, as the brain expands, it actually pushes out on the bones and makes it expand, and then the skull actually grows as a result of that, right? So it has to be pushing out. Okay, so this would be here on the left would be, or on the right here is sort of what like an adult brain would look like. So maybe someone in their 30s or 40s. See, there's larger ventricles there. There is space around the outside, although it's fairly plump. And then here on the left is very atrophied. And you could call this would look very similar to an older brain, like an 80-year-old brain, that we call this normal age-related atrophy. So big old wide ventricles here, giant space here, and sort of third and fourth ventricle, and the temporal horns, massive spaces there, and big open spaces around the outside. You see this very big recessed sulci, and you see this is much more smashed together. You can't really appreciate all those different sulci. And in the baby, you're actually seeing none of that. I mean, it's just, and this is the difference between the CT and MRI, certainly, but there's much more brain here. So that's a 20-month-old baby. Problem is, that's a 6-month-old baby with B12 deficiency, but that's a child of vegetarian parents. So such kids really ostensibly breastfeeding, because formula actually is fortified with B12 and these other sorts of things, because you need them. And so you have a vegetarian mother who doesn't have enough B12, and so the body's not going to sacrifice itself for the baby, because if the mother dies, the baby dies anyway. And so nature's going to select the mother over the baby. And so mom's going to keep, she doesn't have enough B12, regardless, she's going to be suffering, but then, she's not going to be able to give enough B12 to the baby. But it's not just B12. It's the D3, the choline, the creatine, the carnitine, the DHA, the EPA, the saturated fat, and the cholesterol. You cannot get these things from plants. And so a vegetarian mother is not going to have those nutrients available. And you see this happen to the brain. That's a 6-month-old baby. That's a 20-month-old baby. So older baby, less brain. That's the opposite of what you should see. And then with B12 replacement therapy, still vegetarian, that brain massively increases, doesn't it? But not back to that 20-month-old level, or what we should see in a 6-month-old. And I think that's because of all those other nutrients that I mentioned that are not available in just by giving somebody a B12 supplement, right? But you also see this related age-related changes. So this is a baby, and that's how big our brains are when we're kids. Then it starts to atrophy, and we get to adulthood, and they're still pretty good there, but it's coming down. And then you get another 30, 40 years down, and you've got these big, wide open gaps. That, to me, is not just from age. That's from malnutrition over time. Oxford University published a paper in 2000. Oxford University published a paper in 2008 that showed that if your B12 in England was below 500 picomoles per liter, which is about 650, 700 in the US, that after 5 years, people's brains actually shrank by 2.5%. Volume actually shrank because demyelinated, because you can't maintain the myelination and white matter in your brain without B12, and these other things too. And that under 307 picomoles per liter, was about 450, 500 in US terms, that people's brains actually shrank by 5.5% after 5 years. That's massive. So it's 1.1% per year when you got your B12 down. And I can tell you that a lot of people, again, 80% of the calories consumed in Western countries are from plants. Most of those are processed carbs and sugar and things like that, but still, they're from plants. Plants don't have B12. They don't have D3. You don't have choline, creatine, carnitine, DHA, EPA, cholesterol, saturated fat, or not as much. Like things like coconut oil have saturated fat. But these are things that are all essential for the brain. They only come from meat, and we're told, no, don't eat that. Meat's bad, fat's bad, all these sorts of things. And we're very deficient. And the sun's evil, so of course we don't have enough vitamin D from the sun either. And so I can tell you, testing people's vitamin B12, like all the people that walk into my office that haven't started a carnivore diet yet, that are just on a standard diet or whatever, or even if they eat a lot of meat, but they're eating with other things, their B12 can be below 300. Quite often would be below 300, certainly below 500. I mean, I've actually never seen someone on a standard diet who didn't supplement heavily who had B12 over 500. So everyone's brain is shrinking in the standard context. Everybody eating a standard diet, their brains are shrinking. And so that picture from the adult onto the so the baby with B12 deficiency up to the B12 after B12 supplementation, that's actually pretty similar to what we'd see like a middle-aged person, or sort of an adult middle-aged person, to an elderly person. Then you see a normal age-related atrophy. That's not from age, that's from all these deficiencies. And so even just taking B12 and not any of the other ones, if you just had a B12 deficiency and you were losing 0.5% to 1% of your brain per year, after 30 years, you're losing 15 to 30% of your brain. And that's actually exactly what that's going to look like. And so, again, I've said this before, but I'm trying to hammer this home so people get this. In the Western countries and actually most of the world, 80% or more of the calories that are eaten are from plants. And the definition of a hypercarnivore is any animal that eats over 70% of their calories from meat. Okay, so Western countries, they're hyper vegetarians. So you say, we need to go plant-based. We're already plant-based. Everybody's already vegetarian. In fact, they're hyper vegetarians. So you can't say that, the problem is meat, because we're not eating meat. 80% of what we're eating is plants. And that's what's causing the problem. We're not getting enough meat, we're not getting enough nutrients, and we're eating too many of these unnutritious, toxic plants that are no good for you. So yes, I think carnivore can help bipolar. So to answer your question in a very roundabout sort of way. But good luck with that. I have seen, so take a look at my video with Matt Bazuki. He reversed his bipolar. He was to such a severe extent. He's the son of the Bazuki family who own Roblox, which is a very successful video game platform. So I mean, they're billionaires, right? I mean, they're extremely successful and have a lot of resources. So they were going to the best doctors available, and they just eventually just said, look, he has treatment-resistant bipolar disorder. This is just who he is. You just have to accept him for who he is. It's not going to get better. And that was not acceptable because he was really suffering and couldn't control himself, was self-medicating with drugs, would go out and just be gone for months at a time, living on the street, doing God knows what. And that's very dangerous, and it's very, very nerve-wracking for parents, and worrying about their child. And then they got onto Professor Chris Palmer at Harvard, who said, look, we can do this another way. Put him on a ketogenic diet, started improving his metabolic health, and within months he was off his medication and back to normal. And it was life-changing. So that's one person. There are studies that are showing now that yes, you can do this in clinical trials. There are more being done at Harvard because the Bazukis are now funding Professor Palmer's work, as you would expect. And so there's a lot of research coming out that they're doing. There are a lot of big research projects that they're doing and clinical trials that they're doing, and they're already starting to publish those too. So yes, it can absolutely help, but just be very strict. Fatty meat and water, a lot of fat. You want those ketones. You want all those nutrients for your brain to help grow. And good luck with that. Hopefully you or whoever you're asking about does get better. So Max Hutton, thank you so much for the super chat. I really appreciate it. Matt says, seen evidence of keto diets and seen evidence of keto diets and or fasting healing or improving the health of tendons like the Achilles. Mindy Pelt suggested it on a podcast, but I couldn't find evidence. Battled tendinopathy for years, keto now for 12 months. I don't know of any studies on keto and various tendinopathies, but I mean, I've certainly noticed mine improve, and you're going to reduce inflammation. Tendinitis, itis means inflammation. You're going to improve the inflammation. It's a very anti-inflammatory diet, a carnivore diet. You're going to reduce the inflammation just because you're not going to be bringing in all these inflammatory factors and from food and from the plants and grains and things like that have these defensive chemicals and lectins that increase inflammation and pain. And you're also going to be running on fat instead of carbs. Carbs cause oxidative stress. It causes free radicals to be produced from the mitochondria as they're burning them for ATP. So that's going to cause oxidative stress. That's going to cause inflammation. Being in ketosis, you're going to have elevated ketones, which is going to suppress inflammation even more internally. It's like your own natural anti-inflammatory, because ketones block something called the NLRP3 inflammasome, which stops inflammation from starting before it happens. So NLRP3 inflammasomes actually trigger a cytokine cascade, triggering multiple interleukins and various sorts of cytokines that will increase inflammation and pain, swelling, stiffness, all these other sorts of things. And so being in ketosis curtails that and brings that down. And yeah, so you're going to reduce your inflammation. You're also going to have all the nutrients and building blocks, again, like your brain, like everything else. You have these just damaged areas, and you need these specific nutrients to help regrow these things. So you're going to get all the collagen and the proteins and other sorts of vitamins and minerals and things like that that are going to help improve your body and help it heal. Proper rehab is really important. Not overdoing it and working the tendon, but not overdoing it so that you're damaging it is very important as well. There are people that assert that doing more isometric exercises actually helps strengthen the tendons as much or more than the muscles, and also helps with recruitment, so it builds up more recruitment for your muscle fibers as well, so you get more muscle recruitment. So that might be something to do, working with a physical therapist to try to rehab the Achilles, which I'm sure you're probably doing. Maybe adding in some isometric sort of exercises, and then doing a carnivore diet, because yes, it will, at the very least, it will reduce inflammation, and it will also give you the building blocks and the nutrients to help regrow all your tissue, Achilles tendon included. So at the very least, it can do that. Is that enough to completely, that with the PT, is that enough to completely heal your issues? That remains to be seen. There's such a thing as damage done. And so we just have to sort of see how your body can respond. But at least you're putting yourself in the best position for your body to heal, because that's really what's happening. I mean, meat's not doing anything to your body. It's just giving your body the building blocks so it can do something, so it can heal your body. And that's actually really good. So A, that's all we can hope for, but B, it's a lot better than we think. Our bodies are pretty incredible. I mean, they're very incredible, the things that they can do and heal and repair from. It's amazing what our bodies can do. So good luck with that. Hopefully that settles down. Don't overdo it. Just stimulate our bodies heal in lines of stress. So you need to do something. Yeah, sometimes you just need to rest. You need to stay the hell away from it and stay off of it. But then you need to start reintroducing things a little bit more at a time to stimulate the growth and repair of those tendons and muscles and ligaments and things like that. And that will, and nerves too. I mean, you'll stimulate all of these structures and to improve if you're doing appropriate levels of exercise and stimulation. And that's what a PT is helpful for, on those isometric exercises. So good luck with that. Hopefully that helps. There's a super chat from Katrin Kramer. Thank you so much for the super chat. There's a question down below. Thank you. Thank you. What are your thoughts on the leptin reset of Dr. Jack Kruse? So I have a lot of respect for Jack Kruse. I really like Jack Kruse, and I think he really has done a lot of really important work as far as showing how essential natural light is, and how detrimental artificial lights can be if they're the wrong kinds. I say this to my patients as well, that you have to think of sunlight as a nutrient. You actually get very beneficial things from sunlight. The red light can help improve mitochondrial function and actually changes the polymorphism of your mitochondria, and they can generate more energy just with that stimulus from red light. That's pretty amazing. The UV light, I mean, this is very basic stuff. He obviously goes into a lot more detail about these things, but when you're doing a medical consult and you don't want to talk for 5 hours about something, you sort of keep to this and say, hey, go watch Jack Kruse and the rest of the stuff. But UVA light on your skin, that can increase nitric oxide production, which improves your cardiometabolic health, improves your blood pressure, for example, and can improve your health from a lot of other points of view. It also, UVA light hitting your retina with no glasses or screens or anything like that blocking that light. UVA light hitting your retina, that stimulates something called BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factor, which is like fertilizer for your brain. It helps your brain grow, heal, and repair, make new synapses, become stronger, more powerful, and work faster. UVB, obviously, that hits on our skin, that stimulates vitamin D, right? Vitamin D3 in particular. That is on the surface of our skin. Dr. Cruz thinks this acts as sort of like a Faraday cage to sort of block out unwanted EMFs and things like that. It also helps block out too much unwanted UV light so you don't get overexposed. And studies I've found from literally 100 years ago, from 1927, showed that you actually produce a lot of this vitamin D on the surface of your skin. And it can take up to 48 hours to actually soak in, and actually scraping the sebum off your skin, the oils off your skin, and giving those to mice with rickets, which is vitamin D deficiency. It actually cures their rickets, right? So there is vitamin D there. You are making vitamin D on the surface of your skin. And Dr. Cruz thinks that sort of, again, has an added benefit of acting sort of like a Faraday cage. You get out in the sun, you start producing this vitamin D, it's on your skin, and then that sort of protects you throughout the day, especially when we have these non-native EMFs that can cause more of an issue. If you go in the sun and you get that vitamin D on your skin, and you go take a shower, you wash it off, it's gone now. So you don't want to wash or have a shower for a good 8 hours or so after you go in the sun, really. 48 hours would be better. Maybe washing your armpits and different things like that, but try not to wash, the main bulk of your skin that's been exposed to the sun, unless you really need to, for a good 8 to 10 hours even, or even until the next day. If you shower in the morning, then go in the sun, you get all sweaty, maybe just rinse off with water, but don't use soap on the areas that you want to keep your vitamin D, things like that. The leptin reset, I haven't read the whole leptin reset. I definitely put a lot of credit to him for really making this well known. This is something that I learned about before I came across Jack Cruz, just from a doctor that I worked with, that I sort of took over his practice now, Dr. Hendrik Rensburg. This guy was way ahead of his time, as Dr. Cruz is as well. But that was something that he brought up about how important leptin was. Now, that didn't come into all the light sort of things as well, but there are the other things. Insulin blocks leptin, fructose blocks leptin and raises insulin, so it hits you twice. Alcohol blocks leptin. Lectins, the plant toxins, block leptin. And cortisol blocks leptin, so stress and poor sleep. And then, the added piece that Dr. Cruz brought in, which is blue light, the artificial blue lights from our screens and things like that, actually block leptin and disrupt that normal leptin metabolism. And it's a very important hormone. It's an extremely important hormone. It affects multiple different hormones in the hypothalamus, which affect multiple hormones in your pituitary, which then affect all these other hormonal hormones and hormone responses in the rest of your body and your endocrine system. So it's extremely important hormone to have in the right balance, just like insulin is, just like everything else is, because they all work in balance. They all influence each other in various ways. So I don't know the whole reset. From what I've seen of Dr. Cruz, he advocates for basically a carnivore diet. Says eat like a great white shark. What the hell does a great white shark do? Eats fatty meat until it wants to stop. It eats as much as its body's telling it to. That's exactly what I recommend. I put a lot of emphasis on the nutrition side of things because I see it makes such an impact in my clinical practice. I also try to focus on light hygiene as well. I do not have the overhead lights on. This is natural light coming in from the window. I try to go outside, especially in the mornings, and try to get as much sunlight as possible. Because I like it. I feel good doing that. You get natural endorphins from being in the sun. Your body rewards you for being in the sun. And I don't think that that's an accident. I don't think that's your body tricking you and something bad happening because you're doing this and you have to watch out, all that sort of thing. I don't think the sun is this ball of flaming evil demon that's trying to kill everybody like we've been led to believe. I think the sun is extremely important, extremely healthy, and is a nutrient. These are important nutrients and stimulation that we're getting from the sun. I think that's how you should think about it. Dr. Cruz is very much sort of in the camp of like you really need to even do more than that. Sort of almost like a sun worshiper sort of mentality. You'll get outside, get grounded, get your skin on the ground in the grass, and face the sun. Get out there for a certain period of time, and keep the artificial lights down to a minimum after dark. Totally agree with all that stuff. I don't necessarily have half an hour to do that in the mornings. But you have all these cultures and civilizations that were like sun worshipers. They worship the sun, and not only like worship the sun like a god, but went outside in the sun, laid on the grass, basked in the sun. This was important. It was just like, we all need to do this. This is a good thing. We should all do this. And it probably made them a lot healthier too, and just really enjoyed the sun, out in the sun. Yes, you can overdo it. Yes, you can get burns and peel your skin and cause skin damage. Don't do that, right? Be responsible with it. But even then, when you're on a carnivore diet, you have so much more tolerance to the sun, and to the point that I really never burned. I live in Australia, and the ozone layer is thinner here. There's not a hole. It's not a hole. That was propaganda from the 80s trying to blockade CFCs and things like that. They said that there's a hole in Antarctica, and if we don't stop now, that hole could grow and encompass all of Australia. And from that, everyone's like, oh, there's a hole over Australia, and they had no, that's not true. And also the whole hole in Antarctica was a half truth, because yes, they found a hole over Antarctica, but it was only for a couple of months a year, and then it closed up, and then it opened up again, and then it closed up again, and then opened up again, and closed up again. This is a cyclical, seasonal pattern that is normal, and wasn't getting any worse, and it was just normal. You have to think of the ozone layer sort of like a liquid. It's just sort of flowing around and all these sorts of things. And for a couple months out of the year, it just sort of opened up over the Antarctica and then closed back up. But either way, it is a bit thinner, it seems, over Australia. And so everyone goes, oh my God, you have to put on all this sort of stuff. I have not, because there's a whole entire plant category of plant toxin called furanocoumarins, which when hit by UV light, bind irreversibly to proteins and DNA and cause physical damage and structural damage. And so if you're eating these plants that have furanocoumarins, like lemons, limes, oranges, grapefruit, all citrus, things like celery have tons of them as well, parsnip families, carrots, these sorts of things, tons of these things. And you can actually get what's called phytophotodermatitis. That is a term that's in mainstream dermatology textbooks. And it comes from becoming photosensitive, light sensitive from these plant toxins called furanocoumarin. I spoke to a guy whose family has been growing celery for generations, and he said, oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's well known in the industry. You do not pick these things without gloves and long sleeve shirts. You don't have any skin showing, because even if one drop gets on your skin while you're picking out in the sun, it just scorches your skin, blisters your skin. So that's not good. People that have squeezed lemons and limes out in the sun and not wiped that off straight away have gotten, this is in the literature, second-degree chemical burns on their skin, right? Same thing with celery. There was a news report that I did a post about, where a little girl was given a bit of celery to gnaw on out in the sun where they're enjoying the nice day. And she was teething, so she started chewing on this stuff. And unfortunately, those juices from the celery mixed with saliva and dripped down, sort of drooled down her chin, just burned and scorched her little face. Unfortunately, got very, very bad burns, chemical burns, that took over a month to resolve, the poor little thing. So get those out of your diet by eating a plant-free carnivore diet. You do not have the photosensitivity that the normal person would. You also don't have all these inflammatory factors that cause increased inflammation in your body and make you react worse to what could be very mild skin damage from sun exposure, that now makes that worse, right? Also, again, if you're running on carbs, your mitochondria kick off free radicals that cause more DNA damage, and that's going to compound and add on to the damage you're getting from the sun. That's going to make it worse. Vitamin D is a UV blocker. And so when you don't have proper cholesterol, when you're eating plant sterols with those plant cholesterols, again, lower artificially your cholesterol, you're not going to have enough cholesterol to make vitamin D. And you can't make vitamin D with those plant sterols, right? So you're going to have more vitamin D available. You're going to make more of it on your skin. and that's going to block off and offset some of that UVB light that's going to cause you to burn. So when I've really overdone it, and I spent like 2 weeks in the sun, like in a place called Exmouth and Carragini, which are in sort of the sort of tropical, subtropical sort of areas of Australia. A lot of sun, a lot of heat, and it was like well over 100 every single day, well over 100. And I mean, it could have been 110, 115, like bloody hot. I was loving it. I actually had a great time. I never put on sunscreen. I was out in the sun 12, 16 hours a day, every day. And I would put on emu oil or tallow and just rub that on. That was all I would use. And I got very dark, and I also got red too. But I would take hot showers. It didn't hurt. There was no inflammation. It wasn't tender, and I didn't stick to my sheets or anything like that when I was sleeping. There wasn't any problem with it. It's a very different experience. And after all of that, I was just getting more and more tan, but I would get very red and then tan and then red and then tan and all that sort of stuff. And at the end of it, I got, again, very red at the end of it, but then that just turned over the next sort of 3-4 days, that turned into a very deep tan. And I didn't really peel at all. I got a bit of flaking on the bridge of my nose and a bit of flaking on the tips of my shoulders. That was it. Nothing else. And so that was from really overdoing it, from going from 0 to 60. I mean, I didn't have really much sun exposure. I was just in a building, I'd go to work before the sun came up and I'd leave after the sun went down. I'm getting no sun exposure. And so going from 0 sun exposure, except maybe through a window, my office had no windows. So you maybe see this, at lunchtime, just peering out like a puppy in a shop, just like, please let me out. Go from that to then 16 hours a day in the middle of summer in a very sunny part of the world, and barely a little bit of flaking on my nose and my shoulder tips, and that's it. So you can overdo it, as you can see. I did get some flaking on my nose and my shoulder tips, but it's a lot harder to do that. You get a lot more from it, and I felt amazing. I was waking up with the dawn. I was going to sleep with the sun going down. I felt amazing. I've had tons of energy all day, and my body really reset. And so and you see this a lot. People go camping for 2 weeks a year, and it just resets their body. Like, oh, thank God, they feel a lot better. And then they go back to work and have all the artificial lights and just their artificial life, and it can have a toll on them. And then you sort of reset doing that. So the sun is part of that. The sun dictates your circadian rhythm. Your brain tells the time by the frequency of light that comes into your eyes and on your skin. You have more photoreceptors on your skin than you do in your eyes. It's just more concentrated and dense in your eyes, and so have more of an impact in your eyes. And also that goes directly to your brain as well. While you do get signals from your skin to your brain, you have a direct pipeline through your eyes, and also their optic nerves, as Jack Kruse has said, as a sort of runs this like optic sort of fiber optic cables, and actually light can actually get into your brain, as seen by the fact that we have opsins, which are photoreceptors in our brain, and the DHA, which is 20% of our brain, actually track along these sort of radiations from your optic nerve, and it goes in. That light goes up those DHA tracks and things like that. We have melanin in our brain. We have melanocytes in our brain. So why the hell do we have that if there's no light getting in there? Doesn't make any sense, does it? But it's there. So obviously there's light coming into it, and we know that it is now, right? We have light sensors in our brain. So obviously light's getting into our brain, and through the optic nerve, because it's not penetrating through the skull, things like that. So I look at things from a holistic point of view. I think there's all these things that we need to do to be healthy, and I think that light is a very big part of that. And so when you start having a bunch of artificial light, not getting real light, you're screwing things up. You're telling your brain it's a different time of day, different things are happening, so you need different hormones. And this morning time, oh, there's blue light. Oh, here's your cortisol. You need to wake up, instead of giving you the melatonin or the growth hormone or these other sorts of things that should trigger your normal hormonal patterns. And so that's not good. Your hormones go into your DNA, they latch onto your DNA and actually change your genetic expression. So your hormones dictate your genetic expression to a large degree. And if you screw with that, then you're changing your genetic expression. You're actually changing your biology, and that's not going to be good if you're doing it in the wrong direction. So yeah, I've got a lot of time for Dr. Jack Cruz. I think he's great. I'd love to get him on the podcast sometime. We almost were able to connect, but then had some scheduling issues and things like that. This was through sort of a mutual friend of ours trying to set this up. But we'll see. We'll see if we can get him on, and I would love to sort of go into more depth with him on that. But yeah, I think that I've certainly seen people improve dramatically just with carnivore and not doing anything with the light. But when they add that in, I think it absolutely does make a big effect. I've seen people with their leptin, because again, those 6 things that affect leptin: insulin, fructose, alcohol, lectins, cortisol, blue light. Carnivore hits 4 of those. And so for most people, that just comes down, even though they can't get outside all the time and things like that. Like some people can. That can help. Some people, their leptin is just not budging. And that could definitely be stress. People have very high stress lives and things like that. And but it can also be from the lights. You're getting light toxic, you're getting blue light toxic, you're getting all these artificial things. And you can measure that on people's bloods, that they still have leptin resistance and elevated leptin. And it's not budging, and their weight's not budging, their metabolism isn't improving the way you would think, even though they're pretty good on the diet side of things. So all of these things are need to work together. And if you're eating crap and just out in the sun all the time, you are going to be healthier than if you're eating crap and not in the sun all the time. But you will never be as healthy as if you were eating healthily and in the sun all the time. There was a study out of Sweden that looked at women, followed them for like 20, 30 years, and they found that sun exposure was a very important marker in overall health. That women that had the highest level of sun exposure were the healthiest and lived the longest. And that the women who had the highest exposure to sunlight and smoked and had the highest smoking habit, that they actually were as healthy and lived as long as the women in the least amount of sun exposure who didn't smoke. So there was the same damage to your body from getting little amounts of sunlight as smoking, or very similar anyway. So that's pretty remarkable, isn't it? So sunlight's important. Sunlight's a nutrient. Natural light is a nutrient. You get proper stimulation from the sun. It's very important. You get unnatural stimulation from artificial lights, and they're not good. So after dark, you want to use yellow globes, the actual filament bulbs, or like the yellowy sort of light, firelight, candlelight. That's fine. That's don't burn your house down, but that sort of light is fine. Or red lights, and have like a sort of a dark room. I've seen people do that. Their house is basically like a dark room after dark, and that doesn't give that stimulation. They can still see, they can still cook, they can still do things, but they just don't get that inappropriate stimulation from light at night. So yes, to answer your question, I think it's good. I think it's a good protocol. All right. So Billy Poon, thank you so much for the super chat. Since watching you, I've gone strict ribeye and bacon and feel insanely better. That's great to hear. I'm tapering meds with Dr. Rachel Brown. Great. And Dr. Mark Horowitz using hyperbolic tapering, slower percent cuts each time. What are your thoughts on that? I think they are definitely experts in that. I mean, I wouldn't change that at all. The every medication has to be sort of cut down in a different way. Slower the better, and then you'll be better off for that. Dr. Rachel Brown is a lady that I've had on my podcast. She's a psychiatrist in the UK, in Scotland. I believe she's in Edinburgh. No, not Edinburgh, but Glasgow. One of those, anyway. And she's, I'm pretty sure it's Glasgow. And excuse me. Sorry, just got a weird tickle in my throat. So, she's definitely going to be, a great resource and person to help you wean off and come off and do so safely, which is very, very important. You need to come off safely under medical guidance. And if you start having symptoms, you start getting worse, easy, go back up to the dose that you didn't have symptoms. It's pretty straightforward. And then just go from there. So yeah, I think that's a good way of doing it. I think, yeah, the slower you come down, the less likely you are to have side effects. So that's really good that you're working with them. So good luck with that. I'm really glad that you're feeling so much better. That's great news. Just had a question in from Jeremy Fontenot, who says, cool to catch you live. Well, thank you. I'm glad you're able to make it. Jeremy says he lost 40 pounds from reverse type 2 diabetes in the first 4 months of carnivore, which is amazing. Now doing so much better. Not perfect, but keep the crap away. Keep the crap way down and maintain weight. Thanks a lot. Well, that's great, Jeremy. I'm really glad to hear that you're doing so well. And yes, it's even just cutting out most of that garbage and eating more fatty meat and not being scared of the meat, not being scared of the fat is going to make massive improvements to your health. So I'm really glad to hear that that's happening. So good job, and thank you for sharing that. And this is sort of the last super chat, so we'll end here. And this is from Kenneth. Thank you so much for the super chat, Kenneth. I really appreciate it. Kenneth says, in our bodies, brains and eyes, cells, don't we need sugar for these cells? Don't certain parts of our body require sugar? Isn't that why our body has mechanism for gluconeogenesis or natural sugars? Yeah, there's some of these cells that do that. It's a lot less than we are told and led to believe. There's very, very minuscule amounts of our brain comparatively that still use glucose, and other cells as well. It's very, very low, and we make all of the glucose that we need. There's no such thing as an essential carbohydrate. Just because you have processes in your body that use glucose does not mean that you have to eat glucose in order to have that available for these processes. You make all of them. There are entire civilizations that have never eaten carbohydrates, and they live generation after generation after generation, no issues. As long as they're getting enough proteins and fats, as long as they're eating enough meat, then they don't have any problems. It's only when you're not getting enough meat that you have to sort of supplement and get added nutrients elsewhere, and that's where carbohydrates come from a survival mechanism. It's not necessary. It's not required. So all the glucose that you made that you need is made by your body. You don't need anything else, and it's so much less than people realize. The vast majority of your brain will only run on ketones if there are ketones available. It's only when you don't have enough ketones that it starts filling in the gaps with glucose. There are some cells that still use glucose. The vast majority run on ketones if there are ketones. Same with your muscles, same with your heart, same with your intestines, same with nearly every tissue in your body. Every and all tissues in your body will just run on ketones if there are ketones available. You drink exogenous ketones, even if you're eating a whole bunch of carbs, all of those tissues will use up those ketones until they're gone, and then and only then go back to the glucose. So that's a preferred fuel source. There are some cells that still use some glucose, and you make all of the glucose you need. You do not need any glucose from your diet in order to have enough. So none. So just remember that, and and then just eat meat, be happy, and you'll be fine, and you'll see your blood sugar is going to be dead normal the whole time. So if we're saying, well, we want our blood sugar to be 80, 85, or in other terms, between 4 and 5, 4.5, for example, and that's where you want your blood sugar, and then you're not eating carbohydrates, and that's exactly where your blood sugar is. Well, then you're fine, aren't you? Right? And even when artificially reduced, like they did studies back in the 50s before you had to pass an ethics committee, which is was a pretty wild time. They ramped up people's ketones, put them on monitors, things like that, and we're talking to them, evaluating them, and started dropping their blood sugar. And they started saying, hey, how are you feeling? How are you doing? Asking them questions, see if they were getting loopy or drowsy. And everyone was fine. And they dropped their glucose, still had ketones, but dropped their glucose to the point that most people would be in a coma. And they're asking, how you doing? Yeah, fine. Why you ask? It's like, no reason. You don't need glucose. Your brain is running on ketones. Some glucose is used in some tissues. But again, it's way less than you think you need, and none of it needs to come from your food. You make everything that you need from your fat. When you have the glycerol backbone on fat that comes with these fatty acids that goes to your liver, the fats turn into ketones, the glycerol backbone turns into glucose and glycogen. So just by virtue of burning fat and making ketones for energy, you will produce glucose. It's not even like oh, we need some more glucose, let's go get some. No, it's happening no matter what. And so there's this sort of proportionality between your fat and your glucose requirements that is sort of perfectly inbuilt in your body. So these three fatty acids come in with the glycerol backbone, and then glycerol turns into glucose, a bit of glucose, and this turns into a lot of ketones. And so you get majority ketones and a bit of glucose, and that's exactly what your body needs. And your body does this for you, and it can ramp up that process. But you don't need to. The whole idea is like, oh, we have to do gluconeogenesis, and this will cause stress. First of all, no, it doesn't. It doesn't increase your cortisol. When you are just burning fat for ketones, you will produce glucose as a byproduct. It's not a byproduct. Obviously, your body's doing it on purpose, but it's happening no matter what you do. You can make more glucose on its own, gluconeogenesis, etc., but you are producing some glucose and carbohydrates no matter what you do if you're burning fat for ketones. That's how that works. And so you don't have to go down all the other pathways that people say cause stress. They don't, first of all. And second of all, that's not where the majority of your glucose comes from. It comes from that glycerol backbone getting broken down into glucose. And that's going to happen, because you're just burning fat anyway, right? So so you do use carbs, and your body makes all of those. They're not anything that you need to bring into your diet or anything like that. Okay, thank you so much, everybody. Really appreciate it. If you like that, do please hit like and share this with others, and try to get and leave a comment down below. It really does help. Please leave your own story, your own experience with carnivore. Let people know how this has helped you, because that's one of the best things that I've found that help people when they're looking around like, oh, what is all this about? And then they look at comments and they're like, wow, there's a lot of comments, a lot of people here that have gotten better and that have healed, and they might see, you might have the same issue that someone else has, and they're like, ooh, is this going to be right for me? And they see you and others talking about how much this has benefited that condition. They say like, okay, well, that's exactly what I'm having problems with, and so maybe I should try this, and that can really encourage them and help them as well, and help them get better, which is really important. So so please do that. I do encourage you guys to leave comments and talk about how this has benefited you. So you see, I have my no one likes Brussels sprouts shirt. We do have the t-shirt site back up and running, and that's but now it's changed from .com to .org. So it's plantfreetees.org. So plantfree tees is in t-shirt, TEES .org. or .org instead of .com, so it just sort of changed a bit there. And so if you want to get some of the t-shirts, we're able to do that. You don't love Brussels sprouts. No one loves Brussels sprouts. It says it very clearly on the shirt. Okay. Also, almost no one eats raw Brussels sprouts. They want it with butter and cheese and the salt and all this sort of stuff. So it's not the Brussels sprouts that you like, it's all the other crap. And you eat raw Brussels sprouts, they are atrocious. They are bitter and vile. And if you like them, then you're just a masochist. That's not, no, you didn't. Stop. And so, all right. So thank you, everybody. We'll be doing these weekly. Please do come out. We're not going to be doing these on the other platforms anymore. We're just doing these on YouTube. And so people that normally would watch these things on X and things like that, please do come here. This is easier to do this just on YouTube, and so we'll just keep it there. And thank you all very much. Hopefully that was helpful, and we will see you next time. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your day.